What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. And today, this is more of a random video. I didn't really have this planned. It was just more of just something I was thinking about while I was playing Final Fantasy 16. As you probably know from the title of the video, I just really wanted to beg the question: is Final Fantasy 16 a Final Fantasy game? Is it more than just a title? Is it? Does Final Fantasy have the foundations that make it a classic Final Fantasy game? And I really just want to bring that conversation to you guys. Really just talk about it through with myself and just really just I don't know. I wouldn't say like break down the entire game. You know, I'm a little over halfway through. So I know what the game has to offer. By the way, me and Jan, with our most recent episode of the Deadhead podcast, we gave our first impressions of the first 20 or so hours or so. So definitely check that out. We go into a little bit more detail with that. Really, this video really, I just really wanted to make this video really just talk about what really makes a Final Fantasy game a Final Fantasy game. I thought this would be a good conversation to have. Of course, everybody has their differences of opinions. Yeah, I just thought this would spark some good conversation. Anyway, with that being said, if you came to check out this video and you're here for the first time, you wouldn't mind leaving a like on this video, subbing to the channel, and let us know what makes a Final Fantasy game to you. And with that being said, let's talk about what makes a Final Fantasy game. So if you ask several people, they're going to have their different ideas of what a Final Fantasy game should be. You know, you still have people that are still in this mindset of Final Fantasy is not turn-based, so it isn't, you know, it isn't a real Final Fantasy. And I don't know where these guys have been since like 2001, 2002, whenever Final Fantasy X came out. And while the some Final Fantasy games have kept that turn-based combat to a certain degree, that gameplay style has not been utilized in Final Fantasy really since 2001, around that time, since Final Fantasy X. And again, if I'm wrong about that, I'll either correct it here. You can correct me down in the comments. I know there's people that love to prove people wrong on the internet. And so you still have those people that are so stuck in like the 80s and 90s of the height of, well, I wouldn't say the height, but especially during the creation of this iconic franchise. Has been around for such a long time. It's been around longer than I've been alive. I'm 26 years old, and I believe the first Final Fantasy came out in 1989. Super pixelated. I've actually never played it. I've never played the original one, and I know I'm going to probably sound like a noob here, but by the time I was born, I was in a different generation of gaming. And I've just never went back that far. I think eventually I'd like to, but it just comes down to, do you have the time? Do you have the patience to go back and play something so dated? But the whole reason I make this video is really just to have the conversation of what makes a Final Fantasy game a Final Fantasy game. And so really, really off the dome here. I don't really have a script or anything like that. But there's been a lot of criticism towards Final Fantasy 16. There's been a lot of praise, a lot of appraisal. I've praised it. Jan, my co-host on the podcast, he's praised it. I've seen people all over Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, you name it. And I swear I make that joke like in every video. But everywhere, every social media platform, there has been praise for Final Fantasy 16 when it comes to the voice acting, when it comes to the cinematics, when it comes to the icon battles, the battle system. Believe it or not, this game as a package, it seems overwhelmingly positive. But you still have those people that are still, okay, this is not Final Fantasy. So I get kind of confused by that, because for me, Final Fantasy 16 is everything that embodies Final Fantasy for me. Okay, so yes, there is not any turn-based combat, but it has everything else in between. Final Fantasy, especially when you go to 1, 2, a little bit of 3, a little bit of 6, right? Because I know these stories. I know what's going on. And obviously there's more in between that. And you can go with Final Fantasy 12. That's pretty political. That's kind of my driving point here. Final Fantasy 16 has all the political stuff that the other Final Fantasies have brought. If you look at like all the things that are going on in Valistia and all the wars that are going on between kingdom to kingdom, it has that political feel that the Final Fantasy stories have brought to the franchise for quite some time. And so for that, I don't, if you're talking about the story, I don't quite get your argument there. So let's get the elephant in the room, right? Let's talk about the combat. All right, let's talk about the combat for a second. We're going to kind of go back and forth to a couple versions of Final Fantasy, and I might have some gameplay of the game I'm talking about. A couple different versions of Final Fantasy. Not all my gameplay, by the way. I will put that at the corner of the screen here. Um, but let's look at the combat of Final Fantasy 16 first and foremost, because I have plenty of gameplay for that. I do plan to do a review for the game. The combat is very action oriented. This is a straight up action game through and through with RPG elements. Now, what I'm disappointed in, and really that I'm thrown through a loop, is that the developers for this game, so Square Enix and the people that are in charge of this particular game, they had come out and said that this was going to be different than anything that's come to the series before. That this was going to tread new ground, so to speak, especially when it comes to its combat. And the combat's very flashy. The combat is very I wouldn't say button mashy. I don't think that's true. If you're just button mashing in this game, then you have those preschooler accessories on, the ones you get if you play just the story mode or whatever. Or like I think you can get them either way. Like even if you play in action mode, you can equip those if you want to. But why would you? If you play it like that, then it's button mashy. But the combat is very flashy. It's very in your face. It's very fast. There's not a whole lot of moments where it slows down. And it's kind of a change for the series. But really, I mean, when you look at Final Fantasy 15, right? 15 had very flashy combat. Maybe not as flashy as this, but it was more. And again, I don't like saying the word button mashy, but it was more action focused as opposed to, let's say, Final Fantasy 12, right? Final Fantasy 12 has its perks and its leaps and its bounds. I thought the combat in that game in particular was super interesting. I like being able to move my character whenever I wanted to. However, I still had to plan my attacks. I really, really enjoyed that combat system. Same goes with Final Fantasy X, right? People want to complain and talk about the turn-based. Final Fantasy X was the last game in this series that did true turn-based combat. And despite its age, it still holds up. But I think what Final Fantasy has done throughout the years, it's evolved, it's changed, just like most series, right? Like you have series that stay sort of the same. Like think about like the games like Uncharted, right? Phenomenal games. I think anybody would agree with that when it comes to story. Story's pretty good. Nathan Drake being charismatic as hell, the gunplay being super fun, the traversal was fun, running around, jumping from here to there, the parkour. But let's be honest, those games did not change their formula all that much, right? With Final Fantasy, it has changed from game to game. Yes, the core elements are there. Again, I go back to the politics, and I know I'm bouncing all over the place here. But a lot of the stories in Final Fantasy are very political. I mean, Final Fantasy 15 was a pretty political game. I mean, you play as a goddamn prince in that game. You know what I'm saying? Despite what you may think about that game, listen, I don't think anybody knows what the fuck is going on when it comes to the story in that game. But I think it still has the qualities of a Final Fantasy game. And I'm not just talking about, oh, there's a chocobo thrown in there, so it's got to be Final Fantasy. But no, I'm talking about the heart, the soul, especially Final Fantasies 1 through 15, especially because it has a party system. And that was really what I was going to lean into next. Just to finish up my combat argument here is that I think with every Final Fantasy, the combat has been different. This one just takes a more action-heavy role. It's very flashy, but it's not by any means a button mashing thing. It's not that the game's like unbelievably difficult, but there is a little bit of strategy here, and I appreciate the changes. Now, to be honest with you, and I said this on my cast, I still think Final Fantasy VII Remake has the best combat in this entire franchise, in my opinion. I think it has a best of both worlds. You know, you have your hack and slash, and then you have your turn-based where you can choose different spells and pick who you want to play as, and then you can tell them to perform certain moves and limit breaks. And I really prefer that style of combat. But I appreciate the combat in Final Fantasy 16. I think that it's fun, it's exciting, you feel powerful. I mean, I'm sure I'm showing some gameplay on the screen here, but I feel when I go into a combat encounter, I feel like the most powerful badass alive. And I think that this game succeeds in that, and that's what it's pushing for, right? With Clive and his story. So that really leads me into what I mentioned before about the party system. Now, there's not really a party system in this game, and a lot of people would say, well, it's not really Final Fantasy because Final Fantasy, the core of it is your party members, being close to them. And even if you want to go back to 15, right? Even if you found Prompto, Gladiolus, and Ignis very annoying, one thing they did really, really well is you see that relationship with Noctis and on their journey, how close they get. I was telling Jan about this on the cast, that one thing I really liked about 15, while the story, again, you're going to have to watch so many different pieces of media just to understand it. But one thing I really, really liked was like if you go down for camp, right? And you wake up in the morning and you'll have like one of your party members reach out and say, "Hey man, how about me and you go for a race on the beach, or me and you go pick these flowers or whatever," and you get to learn more about those characters. This game kind of does not have that at all, and that's one of the things I was telling Jan on the podcast. By the way, I keep mentioning that. Go check it out. Is that I think that's sorely missed in this game. It's sorely missed with the party system. However, I think that this game does a good job with the combat, makes Clive so visceral that I don't think you really need it in this game. Every game, like when you think about like Final Fantasy VII, right, with Cloud. Cloud has his Buster Sword. He's more of an in-your-face, close quarters combat. But how about there's an enemy that's hanging off the ceiling and you can't reach him? I switch to Barret and I hit him with my ranged attacks. With Clive, I can do all of that without switching the party members. So I understand the move not to have quote unquote party members. You do have party members. There's a couple there with you. I don't want to spoil the game, but it is different. It is more Clive focused, and they are just more of an aid in combat with the party members that are with you. So I understand the arguments there, but I don't think that's what makes it not a Final Fantasy game. So I'm looking for the argument there. I think that when it comes to the world of Final Fantasy 16, I think it's very reminiscent of what's come before. Obviously, it's got to be different. You can't have, the same, you can't have the same setting in every game, right? Like, I can't have Clive running through Midgar, right? That just wouldn't fit. If all these environments within Final Fantasy 16 feel very familiar. The mission structure, the side quest. I mean, let's be honest, that was a big thing, a big criticism for this game, and really Final Fantasy in general, is that the side quests are not fun. Now, for me, I don't really agree with that because, yes, while it is a lot of busy work, I enjoy being in the world, and it gives me more game to play, gives me more combat encounters. So I'm not really bothered by it. Yes, I would like more cooked side quests, but I don't mind the side quests how they stand right now, because obviously your bread and butter is your gameplay. The story, the cutscenes, it's very, very Final Fantasy to me. The music, guys, the music. I don't. How are people forgetting the music? That's what's nuts to me. The music feels Final. It feels different, but it's got a Final Fantasy flair just from the opening. I mean, on PS5, when you have the game selected on PS5 and you hear that like music playing. It's like it sounds like angry, but it sounds majestic as hell at the same time. I just I think the flair. I think what makes Final Fantasy really is the atmosphere that the game is in, and I feel like with Final Fantasy 16, it feels different. But it doesn't feel like a departure to me, man. Yes, the beginning is dark as hell. You hear fuck a lot. You see more gore and darkness within the story. But especially when you get past those opening hours and you get more into Clive's story and what he's trying to build with the Hideaway and Sid and Jill and everything else, it really starts to feel Final Fantasy in a sense that just the atmosphere, the way Clive communicates with the characters around him, the way the characters communicate with Clive, the way that you can master a battle system. Dude, some of the things I've been able to do in this game is absolutely ridiculous. And so I think with those bundled together, I think the way that Clive reacts to other people, I think the way they react to him, I think perfecting a battle system, I think the side quest, I think the world, I think the music, it feels like Final Fantasy to me. Now, again, I can't help the people that don't pay attention before the game came out who are saying that this is not a Final Fantasy game because there's no party system, there is no turn-based combat. I can't help people like that because obviously you weren't paying any attention. But I know it sounds like I'm rambling, but I really just want to make this video really just to tell you what I think is Final Fantasy. And I think Final Fantasy 16 does a really, really good job of that. Now, I don't want to give my full thoughts on the game. I did give my thoughts in a little bit in the podcast episode. I'll definitely have it. Probably already put it at the top of this video, but I'll put it at the end as well. So definitely give that a listen, and we'll give you our opening thoughts for the game. But yeah, let me know your thoughts down below. What is a Final Fantasy game to you, and do you consider Final Fantasy 16 a solid entry in the series? Do you think that it has the Final Fantasy quality that we've seen in this franchise for many, many years? Do you agree that this is in fact a damn good Final Fantasy game? Let me know down below. And with that being said, we'll see you in the next video. Stay dead, my friends.